I live in an incredibly undulating place. It's basically a series of hills and valleys that continuously go on for miles and miles and miles. So I thought I'd take the opportunity today to go through an incredible sloping site design with you guys on ArchiCAD 25. What's going on, guys? My name's David Tomic and welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about a steep undulating site that basically drops off the side of a cliff. I've taken a reference image straight off Instagram. I will credit them as we walk through this design today. But basically I wanted to showcase exactly how you can model a steep site mesh and then build your impressive castle on top of it. So in today's design, we're going to be using the Australian Select template. Feel free to use whatever template is available to you. This is just the basic example to make sure there's no trickery, no fancy plugins. It is the bare essentials that you'll have available to you in ArchiCAD 25. So straight off the bat, we're going to be starting with our foundations. And because we're going to be creating this design over here, which to me is on the left screen, but for you, it's probably either going to be above or below me, just for a continuous reference throughout the actual tutorial. Looking at this design, to me, it seems like there is a 3-meter first floor, a 3-meter second floor, and then potentially about a 6-meter drop over something like 20 meters. So we're going to start by pressing Control and 7 or Command and 7, depending on what type of system you're on. In this design, our first floor is actually our ground floor and we're working our way down. So instead of going upwards, we're going to go down in this situation. So let's delete the roof story and delete the first floor. Now we're just simply going to start with our ground floor. Next, we're going to go insert below. I'm going to make that only about 300 millimeters because you don't need too much in there. I'm going to insert one more below. I'm going to call that just straight basement, and that will be 3 meters to the next floor. So then we have our 3.3 below our ground floor. I'm simply going to insert another one above that and call that ground ceiling. And again, just make that 300 millimeters so that everybody is on the same page. We have our ground ceiling, we have our basement ceiling, and we're working our way down. So clicking OK, we can exit out of that, and yes, we can delete those stories, which you'll see rapidly changed over here, so we can actually continue working on what we're designing today. The main focus is really going to be on the site itself, and then we're going to work towards a quick replication of this building here. We're not really going to focus too much on the actual design. We're just going to replicate it very quickly at the end. If you want to know more about the building, feel free to jump along. It is stamped in the timestamp. So starting with our mesh straight away, we have our mesh site. I'm going to draw a simple box and all my layers appear to be correct. So let's start at the intersection of 0, 0, 0 on ArchiCAD. Let's draw a relatively big square so we know what we are working with. So if I press the tab key, it's going to activate my dimensions. And let's say we want to have that at 50 meters wide, and we probably want to have that at about 60 meters long. So we have a nice rectangle starting straight away. What you'll see is I've mistakenly made that on the basement layer. So I'm going to press Control C, delete that by tapping the delete key, come across to our ground floor plan and paste that back in there with Control V. Finally, I'm just going to tap off that, come into 3D to showcase what we've created. So at the start, we've created nothing but a flat box, and we're going to continue to basically emphasize these steep hill on the left. So if I click on this mesh, I'm going to simply make it 30 meters deep, so that way I can actually start cutting down the side of the hill. Basically looking at it from a very simple point of view, if I take this fill tool just to be able to actually create some shapes and some general ideas of where things belong, let's say we have our long emphasized shape here, we'll make it 30 meters by 10 meters. That seems about right. And then by holding the Alt key, clicking on that again, we can draw our secondary square, which is probably about there. They look exactly the same length. So let's go 10 meters by another 30 meters, which in all honesty is probably a bit of an overkill. So I'm going to tap on that edge, drag it back. Let's drag it back 10 meters. Roughly here is where the edge of those retaining walls is on that image. So basically what we're going to be creating is a stepping site from this point here going further and further and further down. Now, like I said before, it looks approximately like 3 meters on the ground floor, 3 meters on the basement, and then another 6 meters to the bottom of this retaining wall, maybe a little bit where we see the edge of the photo. So that means it's a 12-meter drop from the top of the house to the bottom. If we lose that 3 meters of the basement, probably about a 9-meter fall. So if we do some simple maths, by pressing the M key, we get our measuring tool. We can search that it's 30 meters approximately from the edge of where I've started my mesh to the line that I've drawn. So now if we open up our calculator tool, we can simply go 30 meters divided by 9 meters, and you'll see we get a 3.33 recurring contour line. Now I do want to make these a little bit undulating and a bit challenging and not just a steep drop. So what we're going to do is we're going to select our spline tool, and I'm simply just going to click anywhere and draw my first curve. So that's going to be my first curve. Holding the Alt button again, I'm going to draw my second curve. Now by pressing Control D, I can move this across. Control D again, I'm going to make sure that is 3, 3, 3, 3, minus button, and then enter, which makes it exactly 3 meters, 333 millimeters away from that original line. I'm going to repeat that process a couple more times until I get to this edge, and I'm going to show you what the finished product looks like of just these simple 2D spline lines. Okay, and there we have most of those spline lines created, just basically freehand clicking and sketching wherever we want. What I do want to just simply do is make sure none of my lines are overlapping the previous line that we drew. So if I fix that one up, everything should be relatively perfect. Now what we want to come in and do is select our mesh tool, go to our mesh, hold the space bar over that spline line that we drew and click on it. And then while still holding the space bar, click on that line and select OK. We want to repeat that same step for the rest of these spline lines. Now that we have all those points created, we can simply select all those splines, delete them, again, delete that spline there, and then start manipulating this entire surface here. So if we click on that mesh again, and let's pick our first corner, which is going to be a dead flat line across the front. We're going to click on this corner, and then we're going to come across to this elevate mesh point, which looks like a line with a Z on it. So clicking on that, I'm going to change that to project 0. And that is going to be project 00. So basically for me, that is the top of my boundary. That is my ground floor of where I enter, which is 00. I'm going to click OK on that line. Now, because I made 9 identical lines that ended roughly at the edge of this building, I'm going to lower them by 1 meter each. So if I click on this spline line that I created, and then once again, click on that point there, it's automatically going to jump back to our mesh adjustment, so we don't have to keep fiddling around with that, which is really good. Then I'm going to come across to here, project 0, apply to all, which means it's going to apply to all of these little dots here, minus 1 meter, clicking OK. Next, I'm going to repeat that step on the next spline, again, minus 2 meters. So every single line, we're dropping 1 meter further. So if I continue that pattern all the way down, let's go 3 meters, and then we're going to go minus 4 meters, and I'm going to continue that pattern all the way down till we get to the end of our site mesh. Now that I've got minus 11 on this final line, I'm simply going to go to this corner here and go minus 12 meters and minus 12 meters on that corner as well. If we come back into our 3D, we'll see that our site has completely changed, and there's 2 simple errors in our mesh here, which we can simply click on the edge and align with the nearest points to it. And there we go. Now we have our sloping mesh site that replicates what we see roughly on this diagram over here. I quickly want to point out, if you are an architecture student or somebody in the architecture profession, the first link down in the description below will take you directly to my website, where you can download a series of construction drawing checklists and even sketch design checklists. These are fundamental for anybody starting out that wants to make sure they have everything on their plans every single time. I still use these checklists every single day to make sure that any document that leaves the office is 100% perfect. So if you do need some assistance with your construction drawings or even your sketch design plans that are going out to clients and you're trying to impress, make sure you check out those checklists. Now that we have our contours created, we can start modeling and manipulating this house over here. So we've got the foundational building blocks of what we're going to be creating. I'm simply going to click on all of these elevation and section markers, Control D, and just move them out of the way because we don't need that for now. What we do want to be creating is a nice big thick slab on both the roof, the ground, and everything in between so we can actually mimic this building. But let's start by simply replicating the actual perimeter walls. So if we start with our wall tool, wall external, we'll just change that to a 90mm stud partition because it's predominantly glass. What we can see is the back of this building on the ground floor plan runs all the way across the perimeter. By tapping the P button, it'll flip that wall the way we want it to go. Then I'd assume this wraparound corner goes about 3 meters. So I'm gonna hold the Shift button and press the D key that I can type in 3 meters. Again, Shift D, let's go back 1 meter. And then I'm gonna again hold Shift, come all the way to the edge of this. I think that's sitting back in approximately 2 meters. So what I'm going to do is press that D button again, go 2 meters, and then tap the minus key. So it's automatically doing the maths for me 2 meters away. For the purpose of this, 7 minus 2 is very simply 5, but it's more so about teaching you those shortcuts. Now, I can't see the rest of this photo, so I'm literally just going to assume that it runs all the way back there and ties into that first wall that we drew. If we come into 3D to see what we've drawn so far, you can see that we've started to draw the basic elements of this house. Now, if we come back to our ground floor plan, I am going to take the slab tool, go to my generic slab. I'm gonna make a 250mm suspended concrete with timber finish. Then I'm gonna press Control Up, right click on my ground floor, show as trace reference, simply duplicate that space there, Control Down, down, once again, duplicate that entire roof section there. And if I tap Escape key, go back to my 3D, we're gonna see that we've started to create what we're looking at in the image. Now the basement, I do wanna click on that once, go Control D and lift that to our ground setting. And then I'm gonna start mimicking my actual materials whilst we go through this process. So this already has a timber floor, this is upside down. So if we go Control T, I'm simply just going to change that to a generic concrete structure. So changing that to concrete, and then all 3 materials actually aren't concrete. We're just going to simply make them a nice black color. I'm going to click OK, reopen those settings by pressing Command T so I don't have to go through all of them, and change the bottom of our wood to wood walnut horizontal. So now if we look at our actual design, it's starting to look very similar to what we see in the picture. I'm then going to click on my base concrete floor, Control T, open up those settings, replace them all with the same black color we selected. OK, Control T, unlink, and change the top to a walnut horizontal again. So now we have the black edge of that concrete slab, we have the black roof, we have this concrete section over here that we need to manipulate. So if I click on that, all those walls were linked as one. By pressing Alt and G, we're going to be able to unlink those. So selecting those 2 walls, Control T, adjusting just the outside layer to some sort of concrete. Let's make it concrete light 23 for the time being and press OK. Now we have the first floating section of our building. We're going to come back into our ground floor plan and we're simply going to start adding some windows. So coming into our palette on the left hand side, let's go window, open up the window settings either there or by pressing Command T. And then personally, I believe the easiest way to do it here is to just simply go OK, drop it into our project where it needs to be, go to 3D and scale it as we see fit. So that first window, as you can see, basically spans the whole way of that entire perimeter wall. We're just simply dragging it all the way up. It is a full height, extremely large panel of glass. And looking at that, it's probably half the size of that. So what I've done is maybe overkilled the depth of that building. So instead of reducing everything, I'm simply going to reduce that window here 1 meter and make it 4 meters in total. Then Control D allows us to move that wall 1 meter. Holding the Shift button, I can select all 3 of those walls. Control I joins all 3 of those walls together. And then we can continue to replicate what we need around the side of the house. Coming back into our ground floor plan, Let's open up these window settings here by going Control T, and we're basically going to click our way through until we get to the corner sash settings. Next, we want to click the custom corner 90 degrees, click OK, and we'll see we've created this corner over here. We simply want to drag that back to the edge, hold our Alt button and replicate that window on this side. So as you can see, it isn't the right section, so we're going to use one of our 3 starting nodes over here, clicking it where it needs to be, pushing it back the other way, then going back into 3D to see what we've created. I'm going to simply click on both of these windows now, Control T, open up these floor settings and overwrite everything with a black pen because I can't stand that orange personally. Next, I'm going to drop down my basic menu, go to my model attributes and change all of those window frames to a nice gloss black. Clicking OK, you'll see that drastic change between the two. I do need a mullion transition in this window, so Control T allows us to open up the settings again, going to sash options, changing our HV grid, going to our front view, vertical 1, horizontal 2, gives us that single one in the middle. It looks like a very thick commercial frame, so we're going to go 100 mil, 100 mil, clicking OK gives us that look that we are looking for. Now it looks like it repeats a very simple pattern of 2 panels, 1 large panel, 2 panels, 1 large panel for the rest of the house. So what I'm going to do is come back into my ground floor plan, hold my Alt key and click on that window, replicating it over here. Going into the settings, Command T, coming down to our corner settings, unticking my custom corner 1 because it's no longer required, Control or Command D, and then bringing it back in line with that other window. I do again want to go Control D, tapping the control button a secondary time and aligning it 3rd time on the edge. So if we come back into our 3D window, we'll see we've created a repetition of the same window. Clicking into this middle window, Control T opens our settings once more, scrolling up, sash options, no grid, OK. And there you have that first little look that we see on top, the big panel, the 2 panels, the big panel, the 2 panels. And in our ground floor now, we can simply repeat that pattern by clicking on this window here, holding the Shift button and clicking on that secondary window. By tapping Control D and then Control and Alt at the same time, we can duplicate that multiple times to the edge of that building. Coming back into 3D, you'll see that we've replicated that pattern of 2, 1, 2, 1 all the way down. And because I can't see what's happening on the edge of that building, I'm not really too fussed. Now, if we go back to our ground floor plan and hold the Alt button, I can duplicate the settings of that wall. Going Control down, down brings us to our basement level. As we can see, our basement level does actually replicate above of what's happening there. And then it appears to go back in another maybe 2 meters over that. So if we type in 5 meters back there, we can once again hold Shift, go to the top, tap D, go 2 meters minus, enter, run our wall all the way back, run it all the way in, and again, because I can't see what's happening on the other side, I would assume it would repeat a similar pattern like that does there. If we come into our 3D, we'll see that we've started to create the foundation of that secondary floor. Again, it looks way, way, way too big again. So I'm going to come into my basement floor plan, go Control D, and I'm going to move this wall back another 5 meters. Holding the control button, I can click on my additional walls and basically just cut them right off. That definitely looks a little bit better than what we were previously looking at, and it's starting to look like we are creating the same shapes as what is seen up here. Now, we are missing the roof of this basement floor plan, so if we go to our ground ceiling and tap Control minus once, so if we tap our Alt button, we can duplicate the settings of that slab, right click basement, show as trace reference, and then we can basically assume that our roof does that. Go back into 3D just to double check on the actual roof we've created, Control D. Let's just drag that and the entire ground floor down 300 millimeters, as that is exactly what it does over on this diagram. We're then simply going to drag and extend our entire roof plan all the way to the back over here, and Alt G ungroups all of our walls by lifting them to the ground floor. We can actually finish off what they've created as an intersection point over here. Now, we'll point out that the story settings aren't 100% correct on this situation. We really would have to go into it a little bit deeper, but the fundamental basics are there to actually understand what we're trying to create. Now, we'll also note that the basement ceiling does extend 2 meters. So just like we did a second ago, we're gonna click on that blue line and extend it 2 meters here, extend that 2 meters there. So we're starting to get that foundation of this building stacked on top of another building. Coming back into our basement plan, I do want to extend this wall an additional 2 meters. So by holding Shift and pressing the D key, we can type in 2 meters. That appears to be plasterboard all the way through in that image. So we don't even have to cut that wall to be able to actually give it a second texture. But what we do need to do is press Control Up, click on that slab we've created, Control C, Control Down, Control Down. We don't have a basement floor, so I'm just going to do a footings layer that is -300 below and click OK, and then Control V and click Off, so we create our actual ground floor element that ties back into our actual boundary walls. Now, what we do have is again a series of glass panels on that basement. So if we come back to our ground floor, scroll up, scroll into our large panel of glass, click the Alt button and click on that window, Control down. We can start basically creating those windows all the way from here. So if I wanted to just simply replicate them all the way around, we could do that. Simply repeating the same process until we make it all the way around. Coming into 3D, we'll see that we need to lift our actual slab to the proper basement height so that it aligns perfectly as we wanted it. Now, obviously this is incorrect. We do want to basically just change that to black and change the underneath to wood, so that we repeat the same look that we have above over here. What you will notice is now that we need a retaining wall basically cutting right into that panel of glass and wrapping back around this house to basically create some sort of planter. So we're going to come into our basement floor plan. I'm going to select my wall tool and I'm going to select a nice big chunky brick wall. So let's go block work of 270 millimeters. And then I'm going to start at the edge here, go 1 meter out, hold the Shift key, go 1 meter past that. So 5 meters, maybe let's go 6 meters actually, and then return back into our window over here. If I come into 3D, you'll see that they are way too high and linked to that top floor. So Alt G will connect all of those, Control T will open up the settings, and then we don't want to link that, and it appears that it's only about 1200 high, so we'll click OK, and you'll see that we're starting to actually replicate what's seen in this photo now. Before we leave this section, I do want to change all of those settings, so Control T to open up the settings, overwrite all of them at once, and let's select a nice stone. So let's go stonework 12 for the time being and click OK. You'll see some nice big chunky stone right there. And then we're going to come into our basement, Alt on that section there of that wall, Control down to our footings layer, and what we are seeing is basically that retaining wall all the way around the edge of this building. I'd assume it wraps all the way back over here as well, but that is a little bit unknown because we don't see it. Coming back into 3D, we'll see that we've drawn our basement wall. Control D allows us to move it down to where it needs to go. I'm going to continue extending that wall much further. Alt G allows us to ungroup, which then allows us to basically drag it out. I'm going to extend that another 3 meters. And then all of these contour lines aren't dropping fast enough in my opinion. So we're going to come back to our actual ground story and we're going to start adjusting them so they drop significantly quicker. So this line over here, if we click on one of those nodes and edit the mesh, it's at about 3 meters. So let's drop that to 4 and then continue to drop this 2 meters at a time. So this is going to be -6, -8, -10, -12, and I'm going to repeat that till we get to the bottom. Now that bottom line is -20, so I'm going to make both of these -22 so that it continues to fall away instead of coming all the way up. Coming back into our 3D to make sure we've done that correctly, Absolutely. We've just got these little errors on the side like we had before. So I'm just simply going to drag and drop them to adjust them to roughly where I think they need to be. They're not overly critical, but you'll see we've now mastered that drop significantly better than what we had before. So once again, let's come into our footings layer, and we're then basically going to continue these additional planter boxes around the edge of the bottom of the building. So if we take that approximately somewhere in the middle of that wall, let's go out 1 meter, wrap around past that 1 meter further and wrap into the edge. And then finally, we're going to repeat that same step, P, to flip the wall all the way out to the edge, all the way back. It looks like that just continues to go and go and go. So I'd assume that basically snow is covering the entirety of that retaining wall. Clicking it to the edge, showing in 3D to see what we've created, and Alt G allows us basically to create what we need. Control T, not linked. We only want to make that about 2 meters tall. Control D, let's drag that to the base. So if you see these bottom lines go from solid to dashed, so if we're looking at the right side where it intersects with the mesh, it slowly goes dashed the further we drop it down. So if I know that it's dashed, it's hidden below all of that mesh. Secondly, I can do the same thing with the retaining wall that's slightly above it. That retaining wall only looks about 1 meter high. It doesn't look as drastic as the last one. I do want to simply drop it just to where it needs to be, and then I'm going to Alt G, ungroup, and extend that all the way down. So now we have that sheer drop off of a building, very elegant, very dramatic on the edge of a cliff. There isn't too much more to this tutorial, guys. It is relatively simple. It was just the fundamental building blocks of what we need to do to create something on an incredibly steep site. There is a numerous amount of architectural details, engineering consideration that would go into something like this, but that video would take months and months and months to explain. So this is more so a fundamental basic guide of how you can create this mesh and then simply model something just as steep and just as beautiful on that block. Anyway, that's all from me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something today, and I hope you can apply it to the real world. If you have noticed, I have been posting a ton of shorts lately, and only one of them has started to take off because the YouTube algorithm is a complete guess to me when it comes to shorts. But I thought, hey, let's get on the bandwagon, let's start creating some shorts, and let's pump out some high quality content so you guys can learn more, do more, and achieve more every single day. But like I said, that is absolutely all for me. So like always, I'll see you next Monday.